Welcome to Tossin the Pigskin, NFL edition. I'm your host, Nate Smith. The draft is a little more than 2 months away, so it's time to start breaking down the prospects. We will tell you which quarterback will have the most success, who is poised for a great draft, and much more. Here we go! As always, joined alongside Joseph Caulo and our new host to the draft show, Jacoby Lev. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Alrighty. So, to break things down, guys, obviously this is one of the better quarterback classes, or at least people say it is. So, first of all, Joe, I'll start with you. Do you think this quarterback class will live up to the hype overall?
Well, I think so, but with one cautionary tale to it would be last year, everybody said, well, this is the weakest class we've had in 10 years or so. And I think it was a strong class with Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes being drafted high as well. I think those guys will pan out. So perhaps this year, all the guys, all the experts, so to speak, are saying that this is going to be a good class. Maybe it underwhelms. But right now, I see 4 or 5 guys that very well could be starting day one in the NFL next year.
Yeah, that would be a lot. All right, Jacob, we'll start with you. Entering the draft, before anything happens, before we see anything on the field, what we've seen in college, who do you think is the best quarterback right now entering the draft?
Right now, well, okay, the top 3 quarterbacks are Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and Josh Rosen.
Okay.
But I'm going to go Josh Rosen. I think he's the most mechanically sound quarterback of them all. If you take a look at his game against Texas A&M, which was the first game of the season, he led them to a comeback when he had 400 yards passing, almost 500 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. I really do think he's going to, just be able to translate his talent from the college game into the NFL. Whatever team does draft him to, he will be able to.
Bad. Joe, what do you think?
I'm with you, Jacob. I like Rosen. One of the things I really like about him is even when he was a true freshman out there at UCLA, he just looked like he knew what he was doing. So he's one of those guys that maybe if freshmen could leave in college football, that maybe he would even be a first-round draft pick a couple years ago. So he seems the most surefire, you could say, as far as pro style. But that being said, my gut still tells me Baker Mayfield. He's one heck of a competitor. 43 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and you can say, oh, spread offense this, spread offense that, but at the end of the day, that's incredible. That's an incredible split, almost throwing 5,000 yards. And one telling game for me, if the jury was still out, so to speak, on Baker, was after he won the Heisman. A lot of times after a guy wins a Heisman, the press goes to their head, and maybe they don't play as well in that big bowl game. In the Rose Bowl, he was great. Oh, you may have lost that game, but at the end of the day, that wasn't him losing it. Their defense gave up, 55 points. So that game in particular, I like what I saw from Baker. He's got a lot of heart. I think he can come into the NFL and really elevate a team's play.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you. I got to go with the Heisman Trophy winner, Baker. I mean, you mentioned it right there, the last thing you said, heart. And I think that's one thing Deshaun Watson we saw last year. People say, oh, he throws too many picks. He had this, he had that. People trying to critique his game. He comes in for the Texans. Savage is horrible, as Savage is. And Watson comes in and plays 6 games or whatever he had and just lit the league on fire. And, he could be a potential MVP candidate next year. I honestly think Baker has that similar build. You see a guy or two every draft who comes in who can make an immediate impact, not just because of their talent, but because of their mindset. It's rare. Like, you can't teach that. He's just got this confidence and this gusto of just being a great ball player, a competitor. He reminds me of, not Michael Jordan, obviously talent-wise, but just that mindset of give me the ball, I'm going to do everything I can, I'm going to win this game for you guys. But one stat I wanted to point out that's the most impressive to me, 70.5% of his passes were completed. You really don't see that number that high in college very often, especially, as you said, a team that threw the ball a lot. He had a lot of attempts on the year. To make 7 out of 10 throws completed, that's unheard of, especially for a rookie. I mean, obviously that number will probably dip next year wherever he goes. NFL is obviously much better defenders. But just his accuracy and his talent, I think he'll translate well to the next level. Yeah. Height is a concern, though. Kind of the Drew Brees, Russell Wilson story. But, I mean, we have seen shorter quarterbacks succeed, so.
I'm not buying that, honestly. I think maybe 20 years ago when everything was much more prototypical that you needed a tall guy, but we've seen guys, like as you just said, Drew Brees and Russell Wilson, if you can play, you're going to play.
Matt Miller of Bleacher Report has stated that it is the most overrated thing that scouts look at is height, because like honestly, like look at Russell Wilson, look
Yeah.
at
What about hand size? I feel like hand size is pretty
hand
overrated,
size too. I mean, they
Sure.
said Jared Goff had small hands, and
Yeah, he had a good year last year.
He had a
Yeah.
good year, so.
All right, Jacob. So obviously, there's a lot of teams with question marks at the quarterback position coming into this offseason. Honestly, one of the most hyped up quarterback free agencies and draft prospects I can remember in recent memory. I can think of maybe 5 or 6 teams that really don't know who's going to be their starter day one. For you, which team needs a quarterback the most?
I'm going to say the New York Jets. They have a very young defense, and I think a quarterback is definitely something that they're missing. They do have a lot of needs. They have a running back need. They probably need another pass rusher, since Muhammad Wilkerson he won't be on the team next year.
Yeah.
They also have some O-line trouble, but if they do get that quarterback, which they have never drafted a franchise quarterback.
Yeah.
It's been a
Petty,
while.
Petty Hackenberg.
Hackenberg, yeah.
I think I saw a stat, the last successful quarterback they drafted was Kenny O'Brien in the legendary 1984 draft, I believe it was. That was the last
Ken
time.
O'Brien, for sure.
That's unbelievable.
A long time.
And Chad Pennington was also a little successful coming out
Sure,
of
sure.
Marshall,
All right,
but
but-
he,
You know, he was only a few years, but
Yeah.
you haven't had a franchise guy. The Jets haven't had a franchise guy in 30 years.
Right,
I mean,
exactly. So that's why I think they do have the biggest need, because look, Todd Bowles is on the hot seat. Mike McCagnon, the GM, is on the hot seat. If they don't draft a quarterback, if they miss on a quarterback again,
yeah, it's
they have a lot riding on this
So
draft.
who fits best there, do you think?
Baker Mayfield,
You think?
I think, yeah, because they have the 6th overall pick. Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen will probably go in the top 2, and let's say Kirk Cousins signs with the Broncos, who they have the 5th pick.
Right.
I think Baker will fall right into their laps, and they usually go best player available in the draft, and I think Baker might be the best player available.
All right, Joe, what do you think? Which team needs a quarterback the most?
Jets definitely need one. I think the most obvious one would be to say Cleveland.
Yeah.
But they kind of need everything. I mean, they need a cornerback. Saquon Barkley as a running back coming in would be helpful to them. I mean, if you're Cleveland, you're falling out of the tree. You're just trying to hold on, just trying to grab something. You want something to go right. That's kind of where they're at.
Right.
But besides then, I'm going to say the Cardinals. And especially with the news just coming out with Larry Fitzgerald. He's all in. He's coming back. You got a new coach. And this team has a good defense. So this isn't a situation where, all right, Cardinals, we need to rebuild and we're starting this. No, you kind of have a situation here. You got some players. David Johnson's coming back.
Yeah,
if you can get a quarterback, you probably going to have to move up to get one. If you want Baker or you want one of the LA quarterbacks, Rosen or Darnold, you're probably going to have to move up. But I say they need it the most. They're the most likely, I think, to move up or pull some type of trade to get a quarterback, because they really are a quarterback away from at least contending for the playoffs.
I have heard that Lamar Jackson could be a fit with the Cardinals, or maybe even like a Josh Allen.
It's risky, though.
So,
it's
it is
risky.
risky.
It's
Yeah.
risky.
Both of those two guys, though, I feel like they would try to steer away from, because they're in a situation where
They might need some
they
time.
want to win now. They have a lot of guys in their mid-20s, approaching 30s on that defensive side of the ball. Fitzgerald, probably his last year. I'm actually surprised they said he was coming back. But yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, they really have no one right now. You cannot start a season with Drew Stanton. You cannot start a
He's
season
not
with
even
Blaine
signed.
Gabbert.
He's not even signed.
Yeah, there you go.
They have 0 quarterbacks signed to contracts.
Yeah, so I mean, they literally have no one.
And they
So
don't have a
gotta-
lot of cap space relatively, so they can't. I mean, they could
like
try to
they're-
get Cousins, or they could try to
Right.
sign a guy, but they're going to have to cut a Tyrann Mathieu. They're going to have to cut a Chandler
Right.
Jones. So realistically, they got to go heavy on this draft and get a quarterback.
Yeah, so for me, I obviously, like you said, Cleveland needs one bad. They've been a dumpster fire for God knows how long.
Since they
long
became a
time.
franchise in '99, pretty much.
So besides the obvious need of Cleveland, I think Denver, honestly. I'm going to go Denver. Trevor Siemian has not worked out. He's had a few good games here or there, lit up the Cowboys, man, last year. But besides that, overall, his resume is not what you need for a consistent starting quarterback. Ever since they lost Peyton Manning, they had Tebow before Manning, that didn't work. Paxton Lynch, that didn't work. I think the Broncos need a quarterback bad. As you mentioned, I expect them to chuck their paybook at Kirk Cousins. But if that doesn't work out, they got to,
They
right?
have to.
I mean, they have to.
They have to. There's no question.
And that's another team. They kind of remind me of the Cardinals because defensively, that team is stellar. 2 years ago, they had the best defense in the entire league. And then last year, you saw them and the Giants both, which I thought was interesting. 2 years ago, both those teams had dominant defenses. Both those teams had poor quarterback play this year. And people say it does, but it makes the defense play worse. They're on the field more. They're tired.
The three and outs.
The locker room gets split. Yeah, you get those 3 and outs every time down the field. You need a quarterback who can move the ball.
Agreed.
Okay, moving into our last segment. So we just talked about all the prospects, Mayfield, Allen, Rosen, Darnold. Joe, I'll start with you on this one. Out of all the guys, they all have talent, they all have potential to succeed, but who do you think, what's your gut tell you as far as who's actually going to succeed the most in the NFL?
Well, I'll say that I stick with my gut, which has been Baker. I think at the end of the day, I see him, and I see him being a guy that day one he can make a change, and I don't see that going anywhere. But besides him, maybe a little bit off the board, we haven't mentioned his name yet. I think Mason Rudolph has a good chance to, maybe since he's not a top prospect, maybe he slides a little bit in the first round, goes to a little bit of a better situation, a little bit better of a coaching staff. Maybe New England gets him to come in under Brady. You never know. If sometimes, just going high and getting the big paycheck because you got drafted top 5 isn't necessarily good for your career. So maybe Baker could be good for a little while and then he flames out. Sometimes it's better to go and sit, the Jimmy Garoppolo way, so to speak. So I'll go off the board. I'll say Baker, but keep your eyes on Mason Rudolph out of Oklahoma State.
For me, it's Josh Allen, strictly based on potential. I mean, the dude's huge. I think he's 6'5", just a big boy in the pocket.
Big arm,
got a cannon. His completion percentage is a large concern for me. We were just talking about Baker earlier at 70. He's sitting at 56% completion percentage for the year. That is not good.
It's Cam Newton numbers.
Yeah, right. So inconsistency is a big issue for him. The talent isn't a question. He has potential to be a superstar in the NFL. So just strictly on that, I'm banking if he goes to the mid-first round, gets to a better coaching staff, maybe doesn't have to play right away. I think he's the type of dude that could evolve into a franchise quarterback. So I'm going to go with Josh Allen as far as most success. All right, Jacob, wrap it up for us. Who do you like the most?
I'm not going to go Josh Allen. I'm not a big fan of him. I don't think he could hit the Pacific Ocean if it was a wide receiver.
Wow.
So I'm just going to put it out there. I'm going to go Baker Mayfield. As you guys mentioned earlier, his mentality. He's got the Kobe Bryant mentality too. The it factor.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the most important thing. He shines the best when the lights are brightest. And I think every Sunday, a lot of people watch these games, probably more than a lot of Oklahoma games. Sure. I think he's going to be able to shine brightest on the NFL stage. And I really do think whatever team winds up with him, they're going to be very happy with the finished product of Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, we'll see a lot of quality quarterbacks to keep our eye on this upcoming season.
This will be a very, very fun draft. I cannot wait till late April, I believe it is. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, as you guys mentioned, there's a lot of quarterbacks coming in this draft. Very excited for this draft. A lot of talent on the board, so we'll see how it all pans out. That'll do it for the first episode of the NFL Draft Edition. I'm your host, Nate Smith, alongside Joseph Caulo and Jacob Lev. Have a great weekend, folks.